I have been involved in communications law and policy for 4 decades now, believe it or not, and I can say without much fear of contradiction that this is one of the most momentous decisions that the FCC has made during those 4 decades, and I also happen to think it's one of the most misguided. Now, most of us understand that the FCC is about to adopt Title II public utility regulation for the internet providers. As a matter of first principles, there's really not a need for the FCC actually to adopt any new net neutrality like mandates, because there's no convincing evidence of market failure, and there's no evidence really of consumer harm. One thing we know from the history of public utility regulation at the FCC, and by the way, at other agencies as well, is that that type of regulation is not conducive to encouraging or providing incentives for innovation, investment. But the fact of the matter is, when they begin to look at the zero rate plans, when they look at usage tiers, when they look at what really constitutes prioritization, of course the end result of the FCC deciding to ban or not certain of those practices, in effect, will be what ordinary people understand rate regulation to mean. It's really consumer sovereignty that's really lost with this type of regulation. One thing that's certain is that there'll be a lot of uncertainty. I don't have any hesitancy in making that prediction. And the uncertainty will necessarily be there because of the discretion that the FCC will grant itself and is granting itself in this new regime. And it really goes to the notion of whether the FCC adheres to rule of law norms, or you might say whether the FCC itself is lawful. It's pretty clear that when the new rules are adopted, the agency contemplates that it will accept and grant waivers of its rules to certain firms that make a plea that the rules are too burdensome or they shouldn't be covered. What's going to result will be that the special pleading that takes place at the FCC for firms to try and disadvantage their competitors or advantage themselves will rise to even new heights, and the heights are pretty far up there already. What it reminds me of is really what in English constitutional history used to be called the dispensing power, in which the kings, through the exercise of their royal prerogatives, would dispense with certain laws that Parliament adopted. Look, here's a good example. Right off the bat, the FCC has announced that there's going to be a new, what it calls a conduct rule, or perhaps a good conduct rule, that will be sort of a catch-all. The FCC is going to be exercising its discretion in a way that's completely untethered from any law, from any standard that Congress has adopted. You can search the Communications Act from top to bottom, and you're not going to find, quote, a good conduct standard. Well, I've argued essentially for a decade now that net neutrality rules do present serious First Amendment problems. At bottom, these rules require that the internet service providers, subject to the mandates, carry all speech indiscriminately. Now, if you're a common carrier, historically, that's what common carriage meant. But remember that in that case, essentially, you were talking about a monopoly environment where the government presumably had a compelling interest in regulating providers as common carriers. The line between a decision which purports to be based on whether messages are prioritized or not. When just when you think about that, that implicates really the First Amendment as to how the speaker chooses to prioritize messages. But even if you were to assume there was some legitimacy to that type of regulation, it's easy to see how the commission could take a further step into actually thinking about and looking at the content of the message itself.